Montana Territory, June 1886. The sun had barely climbed over the Bitterroot Mountains when the cowboy found her, sprawled in the dirt like a broken flower, the hem of her dress soaked through with morning dew. Orrin Ellery drew his horse to a stop, sliding out of the saddle in one smooth motion. He crouched beside her, brushing a strand of dark red hair away from her face. Her skin was pale, lips cracked, and her hands were scraped raw. The woman was unconscious, barely breathing, but still alive. He looked around. No wagon, no horse. Just her, alone on the side of a wagon trail that hadn't seen much use in weeks. A ripped envelope was clutched in her hand, stained by sweat and soil. He gently pried it from her fingers and scanned the writing. "Miss Kenna Orwood," he read aloud, his voice low. "To be delivered to Thomas Granley, Red Bluff, Montana Territory." Orrin's jaw tightened. Red Bluff was nearly 20 miles east. If she had been walking from there, she had not made it far. He slipped his arms beneath her and lifted her carefully. She was light, like she had not eaten in days. Her head lolled against his chest. He mounted up with her in his arms, settling her in front of him, and turned his horse back toward his ranch. "I do not know what happened to you, Miss Orwood," he said softly, "but you are safe now." Kenna woke to the scent of wood smoke and stew. She blinked up at the timbered ceiling, breathing slow and careful. Her body ached all over and her lips felt like paper. "You are awake." The voice was deep, steady. She turned her head and saw a man sitting beside the bed, tall and broad-shouldered, with a strong jaw and brown hair curling behind his ears. His eyes were the color of dark honey, steady on her face. "Where am I?" she rasped. "My place. You passed out on the trail west of Red Bluff." "I brought you here. Name is Orrin Ellery," Kenna swallowed. "I was going to meet someone, Thomas Granley." Her voice cracked again. Was a mail-order bride." Orrin said nothing for a moment, then he reached for a tin cup and held it to her lips. She drank, grateful, before whispering, "I never found him. The man who was supposed to meet me, he never showed." Orrin's eyes darkened. "You walked all that way alone," she nodded. He leaned back slightly, arms crossed. "I know Granley. He has not been seen in Red Bluff for over 2 weeks. Word is he packed up and left town without paying his debts." Kenna's stomach twisted. "He left. I am sorry." Tears stung her eyes, but she blinked them away. "I have nowhere else to go." Orrin's voice was quiet but firm. "You do now." She looked up at him. "Why would you help me?" "You do not know me." "Because I found you half dead on my land," he said, his tone low but warm. "And because no woman deserves to be tossed aside like that." Kenna stared at him, unsure what to say. No one had ever spoken to her like that, not her father, not the man she was supposed to marry. Later, after she slept again and ate broth in small spoonfuls, Orrin helped her sit up, steadying her with one hand on her back. "You were lucky," he said. "Another day out there and you might not have woken up." Kenna looked down at her lap. "I do not feel lucky." "You are here," he said. "That matters." Over the next few days, Kenna grew stronger. Orrin gave her his spare room, fed her 3 meals a day, and never once asked anything of her. He worked the ranch from morning till dusk and always made sure she had what she needed before he left the house. One morning, Kenna stood at the stove stirring oatmeal. Orrin walked in, dust clinging to his shirt, and paused in the doorway. "You do not have to cook," he said. "I want to," she replied, keeping her eyes on the pot. "I owe you more than I can say." "You do not owe me anything." She turned then, eyes meeting his. "You saved me." Orrin stepped closer, voice low. "I could not leave you out there. I would not." A silence settled between them, not awkward, just full. Then he cleared his throat. "I have a spare horse. If you want, I can take you into town next week. Maybe see if someone is hiring." Kenna hesitated. "I do not want to leave." Orrin blinked. "You don't?" "I have had enough of men who promise things and vanish. You did not promise anything." "But you stayed." He looked at her, something shifting in his eyes. "I told you, you are safe here." She stepped a little closer. "I believe you." That night she sat on the porch wrapped in one of his old wool blankets. The moon was high, lighting the hills silver. Orrin sat beside her, one boot resting on the rail. "I do not know what I am supposed to do now," she said quietly. "Start fresh," he replied. I came here to marry a man I had never met. I thought I would make a life with him. I thought I had to. You do not, he said. You get to choose. Kenna turned her head, studying his profile in the moonlight. And what if I chose to stay? Oren's eyes met hers. Then I would be grateful every day. Her breath caught. He reached out, brushing her hand with his. You are not alone anymore, Kenna. She looked down at their hands, his fingers warm over hers. I do not want to be. 3 mornings later, she woke early and found him in the barn, saddling his horse. Going somewhere? She asked. Just to the south pasture. Fence is loose. Can I come? He stared at her for a moment. You sure you are up for it? She nodded. He smiled just a little and helped her mount. They rode side by side, the wind cool and sweet through the grass. When they reached the fence, she helped him hold the rails steady as he hammered them back into place. You are stronger than you think, he said. She looked at him. You make me feel safe. He paused, lowering the hammer. I want to. Then something in him shifted, like a dam broke. He reached for her hand, pulled her gently toward him, and kissed her soft at first but sure. Kenna's heart beat hard in her chest. She kissed him back, her fingers curled at the edge of his shirt. When they parted, their foreheads touched. I am not going anywhere, he said. I would not let you, she whispered. Oren laughed, low and warm. Good. The wind had a sharper bite by late June, lifting dust from the dry creeks and brushing it against the porch rails. Kenna stood just outside the barn, her skirt hem brushing her boots, watching Oren bend to check one of the lambs. The sun filtered through the slats, catching on his shoulders as he moved with steady care. She carried a tin basin filled with water and a cloth, her hands red from scrubbing the kitchen floor. When he stepped out into the light, she handed him the basin without a word. His palms were streaked with dirt and something darker sap or pitch from the pine posts he'd been hauling. You didn't have to, he said, dipping his hands into the cool water. I know, he nodded once. That ew's been favoring her left leg, might be a rock caught in the hoof. I'll check again before dusk. She leaned against the fence, arms folded. You know every animal on this place like most men know their own kin. One of them kicked me hard enough last winter I still remember its name. Kenna gave a quiet laugh and pushed a strand of hair behind her ear, her gaze drifting to the hills. Do you ever think about leaving it behind? The ranch, I mean, going somewhere else. Oren sat on the edge of the trough, water dripping from his fingers. No, not once. My father broke ground here. My mother died here. Every fence post I set reminds me why I stayed. She looked at his profile, the hard line of his jaw softened by the light. You ever think of starting a family? His pause wasn't long, but it was enough. I used to, but I figured some things weren't meant for me. Why? He looked at her then. Because the kind of woman I'd want. She'd need more than quiet land and a man with calloused hands. Kenna's voice was barely above a whisper. That's not how I see it. They let the silence settle between them, not heavy but full, the kind of quiet that didn't demand to be filled. Later that evening, Oren laid out 2 plates of roasted partridge and boiled squash. Kenna set a tin fork beside his, brushing the sleeve of his shirt by accident. Neither of them pulled away. Tomorrow, he said, once they'd eaten, I'll be heading north to check the irrigation ditch. It's a full day's ride. I'll be back before dark. I'll pack you bread and dried meat, he nodded. You sure you'll be all right here? I lit the stove myself this morning. I figure I've got enough fire in me to keep it going a while longer. He gave a quiet chuckle, then pushed his chair back and stood. Come with me, she looked up. Now, he took the lantern from the hook and held it high. Just for a bit. She followed him past the barn and through the cottonwoods, the path narrow and soft beneath their boots. Crickets stirred in the grass. When they reached the edge of the ridge, he set the lantern down and stepped aside. Below them, the valley lay dark and wide. A narrow ribbon of water caught the moonlight as it wound through the land like a drawn thread. It's yours too, if you want it, he said. She didn't answer right away. Her breath left her slowly, as if she were seeing herself somewhere for the first time. I never imagined a life like this, she said. You don't have to imagine it. She turned toward him. Oren, what happens now? He didn't move closer, just looked at her with a steadiness she'd come to know. Whatever you want to happen. Kenna stepped forward, her voice sure. Then I want to stay, not because I have nowhere else, but because I've never wanted somewhere more. His hand lifted, brushing the edge of her sleeve, then her wrist, then her cheek. He kissed her without urgency, both of them rooted in the stillness around them. When they walked back, she slipped her hand into his. No words passed between them, but none were needed. The night held them close, and every step forward felt like something being built not from desperation, but from choice. By early July, the summer air had taken on the scent of pine resin and sun-warmed earth. The dry season had settled in, days long and cloudless. Kenna stood in the shade of the windmill, her apron pocket filled with lengths of twine, and a folded scrap of Oren's handwriting measurements he'd jotted for the new chicken run. She glanced toward the ridge where he was hauling timbers with the mule team, his figure moving slow and methodical in the distance. She'd taken to helping where she could, mending harnesses, stacking kindling, and caring for the kitchen garden that had started to yield early green beans and a few stunted carrots. The work didn't come easy, not yet, but with each task finished, something inside her steadied. That morning, at his suggestion, she had ridden alone for the first time. Just a short loop past the far aspen grove and back. He'd saddled the mare himself and handed her the reins without hovering, only saying, "If you don't trust her, she won't trust you." Now, as she listened to the creak of the windmill blades turning overhead, her thoughts drifted to the letter she hadn't returned to. The one addressed to her, still hidden beneath a folded shirt in Oren's spare dresser drawer. She hadn't opened it since the day he found her. It was from her sister in Ohio, written weeks before Kenna had boarded the last train west. She wasn't ready to read it again, not yet, but just knowing it was there had begun to itch like a splinter under skin. That evening, while Oren cleaned his hands at the pump, Kenna stood near the porch steps, watching the swallows dart beneath the eaves. "Did you ever want to leave Montana?" she asked, without looking at him. He dried his hands on a strip of burlap. "Once. After my brother died, I thought about Colorado. There was talk of mining jobs in the hills near Telluride, but I couldn't leave the land. It felt like I'd be abandoning something sacred." She turned toward him. "You never talk about your brother." "Not much to say. He was younger. Wrote poems when he thought no one was watching. He drowned in the river behind the pasture. Spring melt pulled him under." The words came quiet, matter-of-fact. Kenna walked to him, brushing her fingers gently against his forearm. "You carry so much." "I carry what's mine." His eyes met hers. "But I don't want you thinking my grief is heavier than your own." She hesitated. "I haven't told you about my mother." "You don't have to," he said. "I want to." She folded her arms as though steadying herself. "She died the winter before I left, consumption. I nursed her every hour I could, but it wasn't enough. After she passed, my father started drinking again. The house turned mean. Oren didn't speak, he simply waited. One night he said I'd aged out of good use, said I'd better find someone to marry or starve. Her voice didn't shake, but her fingers dug into her elbows. So I answered an ad. He reached for her hand slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. She didn't. "You deserved better than that," he said. I didn't think I could deserve anything more. His grip tightened slightly. "You do?" The lamp inside the house flickered against the window pane. Somewhere past the barn, a coyote called out, its voice high and lonely. Kenna leaned into him, her forehead resting just below his collarbone. "I don't know what kind of woman I'm becoming here." Oren lifted her chin, brushing his thumb across her cheekbone. "One who stands straight, one who speaks truth and rides with her shoulders squared, one I'd be proud to walk beside." She smiled then, not soft but certain. Later that night, she placed the unopened letter from her sister in the kitchen fire. She watched the edges curl and blacken, the ink disappearing into flame. When the last corner folded inward, she turned and found Oren leaning in the doorway, arms crossed. "You sure?" he asked. "I want to live forward," she said. He held her gaze for a moment, then stepped into the room, closing the distance between them. "Then let's build something we can look back on without regret." She reached up, threading her fingers behind his neck. We already are. By mid-July, the days came in dry and quiet, the air carrying the faint scent of juniper and hot iron. Kenna had taken to rising before the sun, fetching water from the spring house before the heat made the walk unbearable. She'd never known how good it felt to move through morning light with no one tracking her steps, no voice behind her measuring her worth. That morning, Orrin found her in the lower pasture, crouched beside a length of snapped wire. She had a loop of fencing coiled over one shoulder and her skirts pinned up for walking. "You planning to mend the fence or wrestle it?" he asked, stepping down from the trail. I figured I'd see which gave first. He bent beside her, his hands already going to the tension knots. "You've got the wire twisted too high, it'll pull the post loose. I've been watching how you do it. Thought I had the hang of it. You've got the right idea. Just need to watch how the ground shifts underneath." She watched him work, the way he leaned his weight just right, the quiet patience in his movements. "Did you learn all this from your father?" he nodded. "And from the land itself. You stay long enough in one place, it teaches you what it wants." Kenna glanced out toward the line of cottonwoods. "I never stayed anywhere long enough to learn its voice. You're listening now." She nodded once, eyes soft but steady. That evening they shelled corn in the lean-to behind the barn, the sound of kernels rattling into the tin pail between them. Orrin sat beside her on the bench, boots dusty and his shirt clinging to his shoulders from the heat. "I've been thinking," she said, brushing corn silk from her skirt. "About offering sewing in town, not just mending but proper tailoring. There's no one doing it regular since the widow Avery left for Helena." Orrin looked up from the ear in his hands. "You'd have to travel back and forth. That's something you'd want. I wouldn't mind the ride. I can take the cart in once a week, maybe twice if there's enough work. You've got the skill for it, and they'd be lucky to have you." She smiled faintly, but her voice turned thoughtful. "It'd be the first thing I chose for myself that wasn't born out of desperation." He leaned his elbows on his knees, pale between his boots. "This land will always be yours to rest on, but if you want to build something with your own hands, I won't stand in the way. I'll hitch the cart for you myself. Would you come with me the first time, not because I'm afraid, but I don't know what they'll think of me. I will." She met his eyes, and something passed between them, quiet but firm. Later, as dusk settled low over the hills, they walked the edge of the upper field. The grass there had grown high and the mule deer had left trails through it, paths soft and narrow as woven ribbon. Orrin reached for her hand, his thumb brushing her knuckles. "My mother used to walk this field every evening before supper," he said. "She said it let the day settle on her shoulders before she took it off for the night." Kenna squeezed his hand gently. "I think I understand that now." They moved on in silence, the sky streaked orange and lavender behind them. When they reached the house, Kenna paused at the porch steps. "I want to build a table," she said. "A real one, not just for eating, but for sewing, reading, talking. I want it to sit right by the window where the light falls in. I want it to belong to both of us." "I'll help you plane the wood," Orrin said. "We'll make it strong." Kenna turned to him, her voice low. "Some part of me thought I'd always be passing through someone else's life. That I'd never be asked to stay. You were never passing through mine." He stepped close, resting a hand at the side of her neck. "You are the part I didn't know I was waiting for." She kissed him with her hands braced at his sides, the air warm and still around them. When they pulled apart, she leaned her forehead to his and whispered, "I'm not leaving. I know." Inside, the oil lamp flickered soft against the walls. Outside, the stars came one by one, slow and certain, like promises kept. August came in dry, the kind of parched heat that made the fence wires hum and the horses flick their tails with slow, deliberate irritation. Kenna had taken to tying her hair back with a strip of bleached muslin, keeping the sweat from the back of her neck as she worked. The table she'd wanted now stood by the east window, its surface sanded smooth and smelling faintly of linseed. Every evening, golden light fell across it, catching on the grain like threads laid by a careful hand. Orrin had finished the last of the hay stacking before midday and returned to the house with his shirt over one shoulder and his hat pulled low. Kenna was standing at the table, pinning a hem for a boy's Sunday shirt, her needle moving sure and even. She didn't look up until he stopped in the doorway. "Got a letter for you," he said, holding out an envelope with a Red Bluff postmark. She wiped her fingers on her apron and took it. "I wasn't expecting anything." He didn't reply, just leaned against the doorframe and watched her eyes scan the page. Her brow furrowed slowly and she let out a breath without sound. "Well," he asked after a long minute. "It's from the preacher's wife," she said. "The one who used to keep the general store ledgers. She's asking if I'd consider teaching the younger girls needlework one afternoon a week. Says they've had no one since the schoolmistress left for Butt." Orrin stepped closer. "Do you want to?" She set the letter on the table. "I think I do. I never thought about teaching, but I could show them what I know. It wouldn't be much, but it might be enough," he nodded. "Sounds like they trust you. I'm still getting used to folks seeing me as someone they can rely on." Orrin rested a hand on her shoulder. "That's not something you have to earn all at once." She covered his hand with hers. "I know, but it feels good to be asked." That night, a summer storm rolled in from the south. Not the kind with thunder and fury, but a slow, soaking rain that darkened the soil and made the pine trees hiss. They sat on the porch under the overhang, the lantern between them casting a soft glow. Kenna traced one finger along the rim of her teacup. "I've been thinking about your mother's books." Orrin looked over at her. "What about them?" "There's a whole stack of them in the chest at the foot of the bed. I thought maybe we could build a shelf. Put them where they'll be read." He tilted his head. "You want them out here in the main room so they're part of the house." He reached for her hand, his voice quiet. "She would have liked that." Kenna smiled, then turned toward him. "Have you ever thought about what you want beyond the ranch?" He looked down at their joined hands. "Not in a long while, but lately I've started to." She waited, not rushing him. "I want to wake up with someone beside me who knows the shape of my days. I want to build things that last, not just fences and sheds, but a life that doesn't feel half full." Kenna's voice was soft. "Then marry me," he blinked, surprised. "You mean that?" "I do." Her fingers tightened around his. "Not because I need a roof, not because I owe you, but because I love you, and I want to spend my days beside someone who listens, who shows up, who lets me be exactly who I am." Orrin stood, pulling her up beside him. Rain tapped the porch roof above them, gentle and steady. He cupped her face in both hands, his thumbs brushing her cheeks. "I'll marry you," he said. "Tomorrow if you want," she laughed, wet-eyed. "Let's give the preacher a few days' notice." They kissed there in the lamplight, the scent of rain and pine thick around them. 3 days later, they stood beneath the cottonwood tree behind the barn, where the earth stayed cool and soft all summer. The preacher from Red Bluff arrived in a borrowed wagon, his wife holding a bouquet of wildflowers she'd gathered that morning. A neighbor brought a small cake, and one of the ranch hands from the next property over played a quiet tune on a fiddle. Kenna wore a simple dress of cream calico, the sleeves hemmed just below the elbow. Orrin wore his cleanest shirt and the boots he'd polished that morning with bacon grease. They spoke their vows with no flourish, only the steady truth of two people who had chosen each other in full daylight. When the preacher nodded and stepped back, Orrin took her hands and said, "You're home now, and I'll never let you carry the weight alone." She kissed him with joy in her chest, the kind that didn't burn out but rooted itself deep. The guests stayed until the light faded. There was no dancing, just laughter and coffee and stories told under the stars. That night, lying beside him in the quiet of their shared room, Kenna pressed her cheek to his shoulder and whispered, "You know, I never knew peace could feel like this." Orrin pulled her close. "It's what we made. And we'll keep making it every day." They slept with the windows open, the night air cool against their skin, the sound of crickets soft and steady in the dark. Years passed. Kenna's sewing found its way into every home in Red Bluff, from christening gowns to burial shrouds, each one sewn with care. She taught the girls at the church every Thursday, their laughter filling the schoolhouse with something light and joyful. Orrin built shelves for the books, benches for the porch, and a cradle for the child. They welcomed the following spring a boy with Kenna's eyes and his father's quiet strength. They called him Caleb. And as the years turned and the seasons worked their slow magic, the house filled with stories, and the table by the window wore the marks of a life well lived. They grew old together, not with drama or grand declarations, but with the quiet constancy of two people who had chosen each other every day, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. And through it all, every dry season, every rainstorm, every soft morning, they stayed side by side. Together, always.